Okay, welcome back. Hour number 2. And I think most of you are aware of the California Garlic Festival shooting. Another tragedy. There will be many more of them. It's a very complicated issue. But the most uncomplicated part about the issue is the fact that we have a Second Amendment. As if we really needed one. We have a birthright to be able to protect ourselves. But we do have a Second Amendment. And as long as we have the Second Amendment, we'll have a chance. But if that's ever taken away, we might as well slap the leg irons on because it'll be over. There's some interesting dialogue from one of the eyewitnesses there. And this goes back to something that I've covered for many years on this program. It's the idea of carry, conceal, or open carry, depending on your state and the regulations. And the idea that armed citizens are the best protection the general public has in so many situations, like mass shootings. There have been too many to count where, had somebody had a firearm, the perp would have been taken out immediately. And I don't know how many it is a year, but there are hundreds of thousands of potential crimes of violence that are stopped by armed citizens. Do you ever hear about that in the socialist left-wing press? No. It's true. It might even be 1 million a year. I don't know. It's some enormous number. We're going to check in and find out a little bit more about that now with Mark Walters of the Second Amendment Foundation. Mark, are you there? Can you hear me all right?
I am. I can hear you just fine, Jeff. Thank you for having me on. I sound like I'm listening to myself, listening to what you're saying. We're going to have a great time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really is so damn simple. When you look at the world and every country, let's take Australia just for fun. When they lost their right to bear arms, like every other country, crime skyrocketed. It happens every single time. And let me go back to my earlier statement. Mark, approximately how many crimes are prevented by armed citizens every year? Do we know?
We have an idea, and the idea that we have right now in a study that they've tried to debunk it over the years, and that's Gary Kleck's study from the University of Florida from back in 1992 or 1993. And he found an estimated 2.5 million, what he called DGUs, or what we refer to as defensive gun uses, every year across the country. And in about approximately 95% of those cases, the gun is never fired. Now, you're talking to someone who is I'm part of that statistic. In 2002 and 2002, on November 18th, I was driving to work when I was stopped at a traffic light in Tampa, Florida, when two individuals blocked my car and got out of their car and made some motions towards me and then went over to the car off my front left bumper and attempted to gain entry into the woman's car while she was sitting in the left turn lane. They couldn't get into that vehicle and turn their attention toward me. I pulled a lawfully carried Glock 36 45 caliber gun, and I put a stop to that incident instantly. And I never had to fire my gun. Thank God I never had to pull the trigger, but I would have. And I think the sight of a barrel pointing directly at his chest and then covering his partner, at the two of them, was enough to get them to stop their action against me.
Tell me a little bit more. I'm right with you. Great story. Great case in point. You're at the wheel of your car. You're stopped. Yep. There's somebody next to you in the left turn lane. These guys could get into that car. They came up to your driver's side window, I assume, or in that direction. Your window was up or down?
My window was up. I'll tell you exactly what occurred. As I was driving to work, I used to play a little game. I could go through the traffic light, under the interstate, and make a left to get to my office, or I could make a left at the light, go down a couple blocks and make a right and go down to my office that way. And it depended on which way I would go as to whether or not I hit that left turn signal in time. And in this particular case, I hit the turn signal at the wrong moment. The left lane was packing up for the left turn lane, so I just stayed in that lane. And as I was coming into the left lane, I noticed what appeared to be an SUV on the right side of the road stopped, almost as if it was stalled. So I moved over from the right lane into the center lane. It was a 4-lane divided highway with a left turn lane in the middle. I moved into the left turn lane, and as I approached the intersection, the Jeep roared to life and came to a screeching halt perpendicular directly in front of my vehicle as I was driving a brand new 500 BMW. I think it was about 2 weeks old. My daughter was 2 weeks old at the time that this was happening. And the individuals, I missed hitting them by probably 2 to 3 feet and slamming into the driver's side door. And that's when one of the individuals opened the door, wrapped his his hand in what appeared to be a T-shirt or a towel of some sort. It was about 6:20 in the morning. I couldn't make it out. And pointed at me, and he yelled a series of expletives at me. He said, "You're next, blank, blanker." And then he went over to the other car. He started to pound on the passenger side window of what was, I remember, a gold Toyota Camry, and the woman in the car was hysterical. The other individual was jumping up and down on the hood, and I remember thinking to myself, what is this? It was surreal. Here we are at a traffic light.
It sounds completely absurd. They run across the road perpendicular to traffic. They stop. One guy pounding on the window, and his partner gets up on her hood.
It was jumping up on the bumper and jumping up and down on the hood and yelling and screaming.
These people are subhuman. This is not human behavior.
No, but it happens all the time. And to finish, it's happening right now as we speak on this program to someone in many places across the country. But in this particular case, I unlatched my seatbelt, I should say, and I happened to have my gun with me that morning. It was as I said, it was a Glock 36, which is a compact 45 caliber 7-shot Glock semi-automatic handgun, and I pulled it, leveled it over the steering wheel, resting my arms up on the steering wheel, the muzzle close to touching the windshield, and when the individual turned his attention toward me, they both retreated to the relative safety of their vehicle and got out of Dodge, turned the corner, went down the opposite direction, and off they went. At that point in time, it was almost ironic because at that point, people behind me were beeping their horns. They had no idea what was happening. I had black-tinted windows in the car. I was at a traffic light. And the woman in the left turn lane, she just left. And here I was, the one blocking traffic, getting my horn, getting horns beeped at me. But I never did call the police. I never fired a shot. I went to my office that day, and later that day, I left my office with a splitting headache, and the adrenaline dump was just massive. I left the office that day at about noon. I owned the business, but not before I went down to a very overpriced but very conveniently located gun shop. Sonny's Gun Shop is no longer there. It was on North Florida Avenue in Tampa, and I bought an overpriced Smith & Wesson 357 revolver for my wife's car, and I put that in her car that day. And she's had a firearm with her at all times ever since that incident. And, it was interesting. I wrote about that story in my first book, Lessons from Armed America. It became a column. That incident became a column for Concealed Carry Magazine, which led to me writing for the magazine for about almost 12 to 14 years. And that eventually morphed into Armed American Radio, now in its 10th year on 260 radio stations around the country, and my daytime show, Armed American Radio Daily Defense. So all of that, and it led to, it was a life-changing event. I'd always been a gun owner. I'd had my concealed carry permit, but I had not yet made, Jeff, the decision to carry my gun with me every day. I hadn't yet gotten there. And I write in some of my pieces for Ammo Land, I write for today, and some of my columns, and I remind listeners, a criminal had a 50-50 shot of running into an armed victim if they decided to pick on me on any given day up till November 18th, 2002. That's a 100% guarantee today that they're going to run into an armed victim because I've never left my home without my firearm since, and I never will. And I have a right to carry that gun. I don't need a law. I don't need a man-made law to tell me that I have that right. You alluded to it in your opening segment, that we have a God-given right to be able to defend our lives, and that is the tool that we have at our disposal today. Caveman had clubs. We have firearms. I choose to carry one. If you don't want to carry one, that's your choice. I hope to God you never run into a situation like I did. If you do, I hope you survive the encounter. Many people do not, but I intend on surviving the encounter or at least changing the odds that put it in my favor. And that's a personal choice. You can choose, your mileage may vary.
Yeah. I've always felt, Mark, that women should be armed, especially. And look at all the tragedies. We're constantly reading of horror stories about women who weren't armed, who are dead. And worse, they're cut up pieces. God only knows. I couldn't agree more. I had a friend, Vietnam veteran. He had 3 daughters. Every one of them, he got a Smith & Wesson. Gave it to them. They had it in their purse. They had concealed carry. And he said, I want my kids safe. He did the same with me. We got along really well. He was a friend. He was a good guy. And he said, I want you safe. And he gave me a Smith & Wesson 38. And that started me on the idea of, I've got to do something to protect myself and those around me. I have a responsibility, but I have more than that. I have the privilege of the Constitution behind me. So I tell people who are listening, even if you don't carry, which you should, Get your permit to let the government know that Americans recognize their constitutional rights and are exercising them. Get your concealed carry permit, even if you don't carry, and I hope you do. But let them know that we're out here and we care.
Well, you're right. You're spot on, and I got to tell you, this is my 10th interview today on this subject of California. As you can imagine, I spoke about it as you are on your radio program today. I spoke about it on mine, and I will more than likely speak about it tomorrow as well. But what's interesting to me is I've gotten myself into, you get into some interviews with some hostile people who just simply hate the right to bear arms. They hate you for carrying a gun. They attack me for that. And, my response to that is, look, you're talking to somebody that used a firearm to defend his life. I never had to pull the trigger. Thank goodness. Unfortunately, I'm able to. It's remarkable to my mother and my father that I'm able to remain calm under those conditions because they know me too well and they know how passionate I am. You just simply listen to me on the radio and you'll hear how passionate I am. But nonetheless, my response to them is, if you choose not to defend yourself, that's fine. But today, my daughter, who was 2 weeks old on that day, she was born on November 2nd. This was on November 18th. So here she was. She 2 weeks old. My daughter is now 17 years old on November 2nd. I taught her how to drive. She's got a driver's license. My son, 2 years younger, would subsequently be born a year and a half to 2 years after that incident. My wife is not a young widow. Both of my children have their father because I had a firearm that day. I mean, it's that simple. And I will argue that every day to anybody that wants to have that discussion. And it's remarkable what you hear. Well, that's nice that you had that anecdotal incident that happened to you, but that's not the reality. To get back to your original question, it's estimated by Gary Kleck that happens 2.5 million times a year. Obama's Justice Department attempted to debunk that and couldn't. His own Bureau of Justice Statistics found more than that. In fact, the CDC has found no less than 800,000 times. So, look, you see these incidents in your local paper all over the place. I reported on one on my show just a couple days ago. An armed individual in a 7-Eleven in Virginia Beach on Newtown Road shot and killed one guy who pulled a gun on a clerk and put a woman down on her knees. He was going to murder her. His partner was holding the door. He pulled out his own firearm, killed that scumbag, sent the other one fleeing. Just 2 days before that, I was reporting, and you may have heard about this case, the 62-year-old veteran disabled in his home with an AR-15 defended himself against 4 vicious home invaders, one of them with a shotgun wearing a Jason Slasher TV movie mask on. These people came in and meant business. He was wounded by the shotgun, returned fire, and put that AR-15 on him, killed 2 of them, one right there on his living room floor, the other one fled outside and collapsed in the front yard and saw his last breath. The other 2 took off and now are caught saying, because they know dead men tell no tales, that they weren't even there. We weren't there. However, they were, and they have the firearms that were left behind with their fingerprints to prove it. I mean, these incidents happen across America every day, every day.
We're talking to Mark Walters. This is a perfect case in point. I see a lot of news, Mark, every day. I see it all. And I do not see those kinds of stories very often. They happen.
Right.
But the liberal socialist media brooms them into the closet and shuts the door. We know this. They just don't get... This should be front page news. This is an heroic story of an American patriot, a veteran, who saved his life and removed 2 useless bags of genetic material from the planet.
With an AR-15, the firearm that the left and the media like to demonize. This man would be dead today if he had a handgun. He would be dead. Somebody would have written his obituary.
That's a good point, and I didn't think to bring that up, but you're right. The reason, and you might want to explain that. People say, what's he talking about? Firearms, handguns? Fine, you can kill people with handguns. It's a different story. Tell them what's different about a handgun.
Well, what's different about a handgun is, in this particular case, this individual had enough rounds in the AR-15 to be able to defend himself against 4 vicious and determined, well-armed attackers, one of them who had just put a shotgun shell into him, a shotgun blast into his leg. He fell. He hit the ground. If it were not for his rifle and his ability to defend himself against 4 vicious attempted murderers in his home illegally, he would be dead today. His handgun would have never done the job. He would have never had enough rounds to fire at them. as he did, he would have never been able to put that firepower on. He's alive today because of the AR-15. So when you hear somebody say to you, nobody needs that military weapon, you can remind them that no veteran has ever carried an AR-15 into combat and never will because it's not a military weapon, number one, and you can tell them that with confidence. And number two, you can tell them that you don't get to determine what I need. It's not the Bill of Needs. It's the Bill of Rights. I don't need a Corvette that goes 200 miles an hour. But in the hands of a responsibly armed American or a responsible driver, we all can handle the Corvette. It's the car that we choose to drive because we like it. We don't have to have all that horsepower, but we're free people.
You have one.
Of course. I have it because I want it, and that's why I have it. And frankly, that's all you need to know.
2004 C5.
Mm-hmm.
That's my ticket.
You need that? You need
What's
it?
that?
Do you want it?
Oh, no, but it's fun. Very nice transportation.
You see, it's fun. Well, how much time do we have before break? Do we have a few minutes?
6 minutes.
If it's okay, I'd like to tell you, we're talking about the veteran story. There's an even better one that should have been front page news. It occurred 2 years ago in Lee County, Florida, which is Fort Myers to anyone who knows the area well. Interstate 75. I'm from the Tampa area. I know that area very, very well. A family in Naples, so I travel quite a bit. And there was a Lee County deputy who had pulled an individual over or had seen somebody on the side of the road. He had stopped and pulled this individual over. It was a black man. The deputy was white. The black man attacked the deputy, putting the deputy on his back. And this was literally at an intersection at a ramp at Interstate 75 at 5:30 in the evening during rush hour traffic 2 years ago. Excuse me. He was being beaten into unconsciousness. MMA style. The individual was straddling him over the top and beating him from the left to the right around his face and attempting to go for his firearm. The deputy was fighting unconsciousness to keep the perpetrator from grabbing his firearm, while dozens of people stood around, stopped their vehicles, and filmed it. As despicable as that is, they were filming it. And
the fabric of American society.
But it gets better. It was being filmed by a bunch of losers who were filming this as if they were watching a television episode, afraid to act to save this young deputy's life. When a black man comes into view of one of the cameras with a firearm at his side, and he's moving tactically along the side of one of the vehicles with his arm down with the firearm, he gets around the side of the deputy, raises the gun. You can tell in a stance that he's had some training. He points it at the individual on top of the deputy. The individual looks up at him. What we now know from the deputy who was alive today, he was yelling, "Shoot him, shoot him, shoot him, he's going to kill me." At which point, the black man with the gun fired 3 rounds into the upper body of the individual on top of the police officer. It did not do the trick. The man stepped 2 feet closer and put one in his head and dropped him instantly. Here what we had is probably the most compelling human interest story of the year at that time, where you had a deputy. Here we are in this hatred of cops started by Barack Obama. Here we have a black man beating a white officer nearly to death, everybody filming it, no one acting, and a black Florida concealed carry permit holder saves the day. The man was given the highest civilian award by the sheriff of Lee County. ABC, NBC, CBS, MSDNC, CNN, nobody touched it. And it angers me that this angry muck comes out when I think about that every day.
No, as I said, I've been a journalist for 35 years, and I didn't hear about it. I know what's going on in this country, and those stories are kept away from the masses. They don't want people to know.
No, and there's a reason for that, because it flies in the face of their agenda. They're anti-gun. It flies in the face of their anti-gun agenda. They don't want you to know that the gun they demonize all day long, the AR-15, was used by an individual to save his life from 4 scumbags. That blows their narrative up. They don't want you to know that a black man had a CCW and lawfully killed a guy trying to murder a white police officer on the street. That doesn't fly in the face of what they tell you that guns are bad.
Truly a hero. So that the perp got up off the cop and actually advanced toward the other black man with the one with a gun?
No. The individual with the gun took a couple steps forward in the video and fired another shot and hit him in the head and dropped him there.
I get it.
Finished him off because the guy was, jacked up on whatever he was jacked up on. Well, Jeff, there was a time in America, as you know, as a journalist, and you have, one of the top 100 shows in the country, and you know this. There was a time in America where every network would have covered that. And it wasn't that long ago.
Absolutely correct.
It wasn't that long ago. And sadly, we won't touch it to this day because they are so politically driven. And I know you'll agree with this. But the mainstream media, I believe, and this is more evidence of that, of the fact that I'm right, is the single most dangerous entity, if you want to describe it as an entity, that we face in this country today, particularly in the case of 24-hour, quote-unquote, fake news or news, whatever you want to call it, cycle, instant access to information, and a media in that 24-hour cycle pushing a very dangerous political agenda. When you combine all of that together, this is a recipe for disaster that is destroying the psyche of the nation. It's breaking families apart, causing tremendous stress, and here we are that we're in a country now that, and I can go back and tell you too, that it wasn't that long ago. Hollywood was very conservative. You know, let's go back to Marilyn Monroe, skirt blowing up over the grate. Oh my gosh, that would never have been shown. Let's go back to, we can't show Elvis shaking his hips. Don't do that. There was a time in America when that story would have been the lead story of the day.
I couldn't agree more. This is what happens when the Clintons deregulated the media, and 6 corporations own 95% of it now. And they don't call it programming for nothing. It's all about mind control, mind programming. And don't forget that. Hold on, we'll be right back with Mark Walters in just a couple minutes. Okay, and welcome back. I'm going to do something. I want to play a little soundbite. One of the eyewitnesses to the shooting at the Garlic Festival in California. He makes a couple of interesting remarks, to put it mildly. Let's take a listen here. This is from a CNN clip.
Around the corner, you know, we heard a pop pop, and I kind of looked over in the direction, and I saw a bunch of like teenagers take off, and a pop 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 pop. And at first thought it was like, why are these kids lighting off firecrackers? But then I kind of looked over a little more, and I saw the gunman just gun raised, pop 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 pop, walking into the festival. And you know, and I told I was close enough. I could have ran him over. If I didn't have my daughters, I probably would have. You know, if I had a gun, I probably could have ended it right there. But you know what do you do? It's like I was angry. I felt helpless. We all saw that little kid get hit. His grandma got hit, and
you saw the little boy get shot.
My daughters did a little more. I was more focused on the gunman. Like I was locked on him. But you know, as I threw my truck in reverse, because the gunman, I got out of my truck and I screamed at him like, "Hey!" And he started to turn towards us. And there was another guy next to us, like out of the car, you know, trying to film, a Mexican guy. And when he started turning towards us, I threw it in reverse and started backing up fast, screaming at people to get down and run. And, you know, the guy panicked and he started running towards the fence, but for some reason he changed his mind and he turned around and he raised that gun and he just walked into the festival and continued.
Okay. Interesting comments. Did you get that? I'm sure you did. The guy in the car next to him or standing next to his car was trying to film the shooter in the act of shooting. Yeah. This is madness. It's unbelievable.
You know, this sounds sound crazy, but this is going to sound, to some people, this might sound a little bit off the hook. But
we're a nation of voyeurs now.
We are. When this chapter of American history is written, if it's not the last chapter in American history, when it's finally written and that book is closed, I think you're going to see the advent of these devices as evil. They are, and I had a business partner who was very intelligent when it came to work and not very intelligent in his real life, but made a very prophetic comment years ago when he had one of those first Motorola StarTAC flip phones. He said, these things and those computers and that internet is going to be the downfall of our kids and of our society. You mark my words. And you know, I gotta kind of give him some props there, because as you go through time and you look back at what you're just describing, what this individual said, and what I described with that incident in Fort Myers, and kids today, you know, I went out and bought a boat to get my kids off their phones. You know, I grew up on the water skiing, so I wanted my kids to have the same thing, and I'll do whatever I can to get them off their phones. This is, you know, I don't pretend to have the answers to why this is happening in a recent generation. It was not a problem when I was a kid going to school. If you had a beef with somebody You got into a fist fight, a bunch of people crowded around and kept the teachers away for as long as possible so they could watch, or they shut the doors to the cafeteria so nobody could get out there. And it was a fight. You got suspended, or you did after school. You picked up garbage together. We wound up becoming good friends when it was all said and done. Nobody ever thought of doing this. And I don't know what's changed, but you cannot tell me that with the advent of all of this technology that this is coincidental. You can't. We're going to find out at some point.
No. Mark, no coincidences. Let me tell you part of the answer. There was a survey of young people. I don't know what the age grouping was, early 20s, teens. What do you want to be as an adult? What's your goal in life when you're 25, 30, 35? And the majority, the number one response was a YouTuber.
Yeah. There you go.
A YouTube celebrity. See, it's all about celebrity. We live in a cult of celebrity. I said voyeurs. That works too. The idea of standing around and watching a tragedy and trying to film it so you can put it on YouTube, and I guarantee you that's what was in the guy's head. I'm going to put this up. I'm going to get this film, and I'm going to put this up on YouTube. That's what it is. We are a YouTube culture now. 5 minutes of fame, 30 seconds of fame. It doesn't matter. This is a cult of celebrity. The most important thing, the guy said, if I had had a gun, I could have stopped it right then. And that the weird part is the guy, the shooter, turned away from the crowd and went back toward the fence, but then stopped, turned himself back around, and advanced toward the innocent and began shooting again. Almost like, I can't prove it, almost like he was mind controlled. Almost like he was mind controlled. Something in his head made him turn back around. That's weird.
When you talk about phone devices, and what's even more frightening is the thought process that would go through a human being's head, because we're programmed in our DNA. It's fight or flight. It's programmed into our DNA. We're going to flee, or we're going to fight for our lives when we're in a life and death situation. I've been in that situation. I understand what it feels like, and I know what that adrenaline rush and subsequent dump feels like. It's not pleasant. It's frightening. But when you think about, because I can tell you, the first thought that went through my head was, holy crap, let me get my phone out and film these guys coming at my car. This guy's shooting people. He's murdering people. And that instinctive reaction with this generation is to pick up a phone,
go for the phone.
And film, and go for the phone and film. And I don't, obviously there's psychological things going on here that are above my pay grade.
Take it one step further, Mark. Take it one step further. To film it, why? To take it home and show it to the family? No. To put it up on YouTube and get your name up in lights. That's right.
Get your name in lights, right. And it's sad and it's pathetic. And what's even sadder, if you want to go back, let's go back and go after California now, was I had an individual ask me today, well, you say that no gun control would have worked, and he bought the gun legally in Nevada. Of course. And he took it illegally into California. And he committed murder.
He's a felon.
He broke every law known to man. He broke every moral law known to God. Okay, so let's say he broke 16 laws. Which 17th law? And I've asked you will never get an answer. If you ask him on Twitter, you'll get blocked. If you ask him on Facebook, you'll be unfriended. If you ask him to the face, they'll sit there and look at you like a cartoon character, and you can almost hear the music in their head going, because they can't answer you. And that is, what 17th law would you tell me, because I'm willing to sign it if I'm president, would have stopped him? No one. I don't care who it is. Can answer that question. Not one. Because there is no law. There is no man-made law that will legislate evil. We cannot legislate morals. We cannot legislate bad people from doing bad things. We can only
they're always going to get the tools. They'll always get the tools.
Of course they are.
Always. This is the liberal argument. They'll take guns away, we're safe. They're so damn stupid. It's unbelievable. There's people who are evil, who are of the dark side, who are criminals, they'll always get guns. Always, always, always. And it's sometimes easier for them to get guns than it is for us.
Well, but that's because they know how to do it. I've got a local gun shop down the road. I wouldn't know how. Because I don't run with that crowd.
No.
However, I've got a local gun shop down the road for me. I've lived in this area just north of Atlanta for about 15 years now. And this individual is a former Georgia state representative. He's a dear friend of mine. He now owns a gun shop. He does a great business.
Mm-hmm.
He has been broken into 3 times. And in all of those instances, none of the criminals left a filled out 4473 background check on top of the broken counters that they shattered.
Funniest thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't leave a background check form attached to the front seat of the stolen, Dodge Durango that they used to back it 3 times into the brick wall so that they could go through the hole like the rats and scumbags and roaches that they are and steal the guns in 120 seconds or 140 seconds, however long it took them to get in and out. And in all 3 of those incidents, there have been busts. And in all 3 of those busts, those individuals have all been part of Atlanta-based street gangs, working in conjunction with New York-based street gangs.
There you go.
Who are ordering these guns. No background check is going to stop a criminal. Look, there's a Parkland-sized mass killing in Chicago every week. I've given the names. I've sat down on a Sunday night program and read 65 names for one previous month. For 1 month in Chicago. And I don't hear anybody screaming about it. And I still want to know why. I'd like to ask Bloomberg why his groups aren't spending tons of money up there. Why are they coming after my guns and your guns instead of in Chicago where they ought to be? Where's Sharpton? Where's Jackson? Why aren't they marching up there in Chicago? And you'll never get an answer from any of them.
I'll sum it up here. For all of you listening out there who are regulars, you'll know. This is international Bolshevik Zionism, Marxism, communism, whatever ism you want to hang on it. They're all out of the same bag. It's a worldwide agenda to disarm the public, to grind the public up and turn it into gray goo subservience. That's the name of the game. That's what it's all about. Now, before we run out of time here, you've got a new book. You've got a lot of books out, but
I do.
It's called Grilling While Armed. Grilling While Armed. That's
Thank you for mentioning
title.
it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a
more.
little bit about it, where it came from. A number of years ago on my radio program, I'm an avid barbecuer. I wouldn't, and I'm wood. I'm a purist. Charcoal and wood for me. I couldn't tell you how to start a gas grill. I wouldn't know the first thing about it. But over the years, I've gotten very adept at it. It's a hobby of mine. I've always been known as the neighborhood pit boss wherever I've lived over the years, and always made a lot of good friends and cooked a lot of great food over the years and have perfected. And I'm always working on perfecting the art of good barbecue. And I also love my firearms and my rights and my freedoms. And I was on the air a number of years ago giving out a recipe that I had cooked over the weekend, which was some Carolina barbecue pork butts. And I had a firearms expert, a dear friend of mine, George Hill, that goes by the name of the Mad Ogre online. And George is one of the nation's foremost firearms experts. I gave out the recipe, and George says to me, you know what? He said, this gun would go great on the hip with pork butts because that's a classic Carolina dish. Over here, we've got a classic 6-gun. You've got to pair something up with. Grilling While Armed was born as a segment on the radio program at that moment in time. So several years later, the book is out. It's Grilling While Armed, the top 20 recipes, how to get off the gas and become your neighborhood barbecue pit boss in one day. It was released on the 27th. And as a result, it's doing very well. You can pick it up at Amazon right now. It'll be in bookstores in the near future. But what we do is we pair up 20 fantastic barbecue recipes with 20 fantastic guns to wear while you're cooking or smoking up that neighborhood and ticking off the homeowners association. So exercising, what's better, what's more smoking up the neighborhood. What's more American than barbecue and guns? I mean, they go hand in hand. People have been barbecuing with guns on their hips since this nation's founding. Liberals pair food with wine. I pair great barbecue with a firearm. So make sure to get your copy, okay? You'll love it. It's a lot of fun. Good. You learn a lot about the guns, and you get 20 fantastic barbecue recipes. And we'll teach you how to get off the gas grill and become a neighborhood barbecue pit boss literally in one day. It's right there for you in the book.
You're having too much fun, Mark.
Can't have fun doing it. You shouldn't do it. You know, what's even more fun was Ben Lang, the founder of Lang Barbecue Cookers. If you've ever watched Barbecue Pitmasters on any of the cable channels, if you've ever seen it, those are the smokers that they're using on the television show. And Ben was kind enough to write the foreword for me. And legendary Texas barbecue, or Texas Bill Cannon, the founder of Texas Barbecue Rub, contributed some of the recipes I've cooked with his championship team and at the Texas Rodeo. And they're all involved in the book. This is the real deal. So I hope you go out and enjoy it. It's an awful lot of fun. Buy a copy for somebody that you know that loves the barbecue. They'll get a kick out of it.
Called Grilling While Armed. Very good. Now, I assume your kids are already well along in their baseline training.
They absolutely are. My children knew how to, and much to the chagrin, I have to admit, of my mother-in-law, who later figured it out, thank goodness. But my kids were able to reassemble a Glock handgun at about 4 years old. They couldn't disassemble it because it was too big for them, but it was easy enough for them to learn how to put the springs back together, put the barrel back in, etc., and put the slide back together with a little bit of help from Dad. You know, this is an important topic, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Here's why. One of the questions we get all the time is, when are my children old enough? How do I know when I'm able to teach? You'll know as a parent when your child has reached a maturity level. It might be 4 years old for some kids. It might be 7 or 8 or maybe 10 for other kids. But you'll know as a parent. What you want to do, the trick here is to strip them of their curiosity of firearms. All children grow up watching TV killings and cartoon violence from the moment they're born.
Tens of thousands, yeah.
Tens of thousands. By the time they're 10 years old, they've seen thousands of murders. They all have a natural curiosity of firearms. In order to strip them of that curiosity, you've got to educate them about guns. My children at 4 years old, 5 years old, couldn't have cared less about a gun. If somebody showed it to them, they knew enough to say, stop, don't touch, I'm getting out of here. And if there was no parent around, my kids knew enough to call 911 to get some help there if that was the case. But that's real gun safety, not hijack language by the liberal left that doesn't have a clue what they're talking about, that really steals gun safety to force gun control down our throats. But true gun safety, teaching children how to be safe around firearms. You know, that old Eddie Eagle program is still the best of the best. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult, get away, and strip them of that curiosity. My kids are no longer curious about gunfire. They couldn't care less. They know all about it. If somebody handed them a firearm, my kids know how to get that gun safely out of someone else's hands. And I hope to God it never happens. But and I think even more important is I had a neighbor a number of years ago say to me, "Well, I don't have any guns, man. You know, I never had to teach my kids gun safety." I said, "Well, guess what? Your kids are over here all the time, and I got 60 guns, and Bill has 20 guns, and she's got 20 guns. You don't know where your kids are at and what they have in their home." Teach your child gun safety and keep them alive, please. It's the number one thing you can do as a parent.
Really good advice. Really good. The idea of a Glock being able to be put together by a 4-year-old is that really rings nice. It's true. It's a great firearm. They don't get any better than that. That's why the Navy SEALs just picked the Glock 19 as their official service firearm. That's their sidearm.
That is
19.
That 19 is probably the most popular concealed carry firearm in the world today for civilian use is the Glock 19. I know it's the number one in the country. A very, very reliable firearm. I've carried Glocks and a number of other handguns, but my go-to is generally a Glock 17 or a Glock 19.
I don't know if the Gen 4 is much of an improvement over 3. Hard to say, but it doesn't really matter. Just get one, learn it, and you've got the best of the best, I think.
You got a little bit different grip. You got the back straps on it. You got the little bit different, I forget what they call the grip on it. That escapes me now, but it's essentially the same gun. The Gen 4, if you got a smaller handle, fits you just a little bit better because of the back straps. You can change the grip size a little bit, but the gun is reliable right out of the box. So yeah, pretty much.
Well, they don't quit. They just keep going. All right, now we got 5 minutes left here. What haven't we talked about that as a great American patriot that you are, talk show host? What do we need to talk about here for 5 minutes? What I think we need to educate people about is, let me talk a little bit about the Second Amendment Foundation and what the organization is doing. It is, without a doubt, and the founder is a very dear friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Alan Gottlieb, who you may have seen. He's the gentleman that wears the bow tie on all the national television shows that he does defending Second Amendment rights, not just in America, but around the world. Yeah. Alan is the single most powerful man alive today in America fighting for gun rights. And that's a very bold statement to make, but it's also very true. Alan's organization, the Second Amendment Foundation, he founded 40 years ago in conjunction with the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. As you mentioned to your listeners, I'm a member of the board of directors of. I'm very proud to be working closely with Alan. The Second Amendment Foundation and the CCR-KBA share board meetings and work in conjunction with each other to advance our gun rights, to win back Americans' gun rights, get this, one lawsuit at a time. This organization is fighting right now in 37 courtrooms across the country simultaneously, Second Amendment-based cases,
to restore gun rights, state by state, and we now have 2 cases seeking cert at the Supreme Court, and we will probably have a third. But this organization is the one that helped win the Heller versus D.C. case, which, of course, we know the Heller D.C. Scalia's landmark decision there that recognized finally the individual right to bear arms. Subsequent after that was in 2008, 2010, the McDonald versus D.C. case, which wiped out Chicago's gun ban. Finally, thank God. And just some recent cases now. Well, they also won the Ezell case, which when Chicago tried to add additional gun shops or tried to eliminate having gun shops to skirt the federal rulings and the Supreme Court rulings, the Ezell case was filed in the Supreme Court, or the federal courts then, again, handed another victory to the Second Amendment Foundation. So Alan's taken millions of dollars in legal fees back from Rahm Emanuel and the rest of that machine up there that just keeps wanting to take people's rights. The fact of the matter is that you can help the Second Amendment Foundation and help us in our effort to win gun rights back with a $5 donation, and it's tax deductible. So SAF.org is the place to go. A life membership is only $150, but we'll take couch cushion change, okay? And if you don't have couch cushion change, go to your neighbors or your moms or dads or somebody else's and get theirs, because it is the single most important organization in the country today fighting for our rights. And here's how important it is, and I'll end it with this. 85% of the pro-gun decisions in courtrooms across this country, in local municipalities and at the Supreme Court combined, have all come from Second Amendment Foundation funded and argued cases. Some of the greatest attorneys in the country. It's SAF.org. Very, very powerful organization. But these court cases in 37 courtrooms across the country are not free. The attorneys are expensive. These cases cost many, many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars and sometimes can run into years of litigation. So we need all the help that we can get. Join us over there at SAF.org.
SAF.org. All right. I hate to knock people and organizations, but I have to be frank. The NRA does not impress me like it used to long ago. I don't know what's happened to them. It's almost like anything worth a damn anymore gets penetrated and twisted and corrupted and taken down, or I don't know, taken off course. It's weird. Remember what happened to the Tea Party, Mark? Tea Party pops up, a real populist movement. I'm real serious. And I said to people, within 6 months, that's going to be taken. It's going to be penetrated, co-opted, and taken off path. And it was. It's never been.
Yeah, it was penetrated, and it was penetrated by the enemies of freedom, and it was never able to overcome that. National Rifle Association I quoted, Media Matters just picked up my show from a week ago, an interview I did with a man by the name of David Codry, and did a huge write-up on it the following day. And we were talking about, they were quoting me, and they were accurate. I have to give some mad props. They were generally not, but they were, because they actually used my quotes and played some of the transcripts. So I couldn't attack them for that. They actually did a good job. But I was actually simply telling the truth about the National Rifle Association and its self-inflicted wounds. Wayne LaPierre needs to go. I've been very vocal about that. I've been out front of it with a number of my columns that you can read at ammoland.com. Calling for Wayne's ouster. You've been there 30 years. We're seeing now some of these expenditures that look and appear to be corrupt. And, let's face it. I mean, appearance and perception is reality to people. So now you have the NRA. Wayne LaPierre is there by himself. I was at the convention in April on behalf of the Second Amendment Foundation manning their booth. And there you had Wayne LaPierre and Chris Cox and Oliver North, big giant photos. And now it's just Wayne LaPierre. And we see the mess kit that they put themselves into and stepped in. So Second Amendment Foundation, if you want to put your money into something, and right now you're not worried about the NRA, when we need a strong NRA, don't get me wrong, we need to fix the NRA, and we will. But for now, the Second Amendment Foundation is the place to be. This is the organization fighting for 40 years in lockstep with America's gun owners, and that's at SAF.org. I would highly recommend that you visit us and check this out.
Really glad to have had you on, Mark. This is important that people know. And I don't think a lot of people know about SAF.org. We're going to help push that. And do you have a personal website that you want to mention?
Where do you follow me on Twitter, armedamericanradio.com. You can find out information about the show. Follow me on Twitter at AARMark. That's growing. And Facebook.com/armedamericanradio. And I appreciate the time, Jeff. Look forward to coming back. Thank you so much for everything you do.
You bet, Mark. Thank you, Mark. You be well. Take care. Mark Walters. All right. Back with more after this. Bye.